Alrighty, guys. Welcome to episode 16 of 20 Minutes with 2020 Mendocino. My name is Carlos, and I am joined by Adam, founder of 2020 Mendocino. Adam, how are you doing?
Pretty good, Carlos.
So, it's been a really busy few months for us. The Autoflowers were released. The Great American Autoflower Race has begun. Adam, do you have any short words you want to say on that before we start?
Yeah, we super successful event so far. It's one quarter of the way through. Our first drop was with United Seed Bank, so big shout out to them for dealing with all the customers and the free seeds that they shipped out. And we've got the next event will be with Great Lakes Genetics, and that should be dropping at any day now.
Yeah, I would likely say that by the time this is released, you guys should be crossing the finish line on that one, correct?
Yeah, depending on how quick the packs go, we've tried to allot enough for everybody that wants to join. So we sort of don't have a, a an end necessarily until we feel like it's sort of all filled up. So or I mean everybody's satisfied. So once it seems like the interest is faded, then we'll pull the plug on it. But we've still got three more seed banks to drop. So that's United. I'm sorry, United already did. Neptune, Great Lakes, and Baked Beans. And who knows, we might even pull another one out of our hat if we feel like it.
So I know that California suffered a crazy winter event, and so did the rest of the country shortly after. How was that for you guys?
Yeah, we had quite a nightmare actually, and we were sort of the epicenter of a really cold, wet winter storm that hit Northern California and wreaked havoc on our forests, which wreaked havoc on uh, our our grid. So the power was disabled in the majority of Northern California for a few days, but unfortunately in our region where it was hit worst, we were out almost 2 weeks. So it was rough. It was a stressful couple of weeks dealing with trying to keep the plants happy with minimal resources and really bad weather. So we had basically a foot of snow, which isn't a lot for most of the country, but in a heavily forested Pacific Northwest forest, these trees aren't really haven't been adapted to snow. So when we got all this really wet, heavy snow, it was insane. I mean, there was thousands of trees falling everywhere, and just on our property alone, every single power pole that was going through the property was broken. So it was really crazy. So and then yeah, it hit the rest of the country. A different storm very shortly after that. So yeah, it's been a heck of a winter, but had a few sunny days and things are looking good.
Yeah, I want to give a huge shout out to Aaron and Robbie and Collins as well for holding the scene down during that mess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we had the team stuck together pretty well through it all.
So let's get right to it. This episode we will be calling Autoflowers 101, and I believe we'll be breaking this down into at least two segments. So let's get right into it, guys. The first episode will be focused on the basics of growing autoflower plants. So, Adam, can you start off by please giving me some basic information um, throughout this episode, and then on the second episode, we'll go over some frequently asked questions for everyone. So, can you start by sharing some tips on successfully growing autoflowers? We can break that down into two-part question. We'll start with indoor.
Yeah, certainly. So I think the number one tip that I try to give people with autoflowers is that you want them to be completely free to run out the gate from the time the seeds sprout, and that means nothing hindering them at all. So that will directly correlate with the quality and most importantly the yield and size of the plants. And so what I mean by that is basically you don't want to let the plants get root bound. You don't want to over fertilize them, especially when they're young. Um, you don't have a lot of forgiveness with autoflowers. They're sort of they're on a trajectory from the time they're the seeds sprout, and there isn't much you can do to change that trajectory. So that's sort of this broad tip that I try to give everyone.
So I know we're gonna receive a lot of and we have in the past received a lot of questions on the basics of an autoflower grow setup. So let's say from the home grower's point of view, you know, tent grower, not a huge setup. Can we start off by maybe recommending, in your opinion, what medium would be best for them to use?
Yeah, I mean, I think I give this sort of standard advice to everybody when it comes to medium fertilizers and all that is if you're already growing, if you're already a grower and you have a method that works well for you for photo periods and say you're new to autoflowers, uh, then use what works best with your scene. I mean, that's just something I always try to tell people. Like, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. The physiology of an autoflower plant is basically identical to that of a photo plant. It's just you're kind of jamming the whole cycle into a shorter amount of time. And again, you don't have quite the freedom you have with a photo where you can sort of dictate exactly when you want it to go into flower. So if it's not very healthy, you have time to kind of nurse it back to life. Or if you have a bug infestation or any sort of pathogen that you want to deal with, you have that sort of forgiveness time where you can fix that and then flip it into flower. So um, but for the most part, what works good for you with your photo periods should work good for you with your autoflowers. If you're brand new to growing, I would usually always kind of lean towards growing with soil, just because, especially if you get a pre-amended mixed soil with a large enough pot, you really can get through an autoflower life cycle without adding very much fertilizer, if any at all, depending on the soil. The number one thing with soil and beginning growers is just don't overwater. I mean, that's far and above a problem, as opposed to underwatering. You know, very few people let their plants dry out and die. I mean, that's basically neglect. What happens is, you know, you go into the room, and especially when the plant's tiny, you just want to water it. You want to do something, so you dump more water on it, and definitely by far the biggest mistake you can make is just overwatering a soil plant. Pick up the pot. It's the best advice I can give you. It shouldn't be saturated. If you really want to test, you can fill up a pot with soil and saturate it with water. Soak it until it's maximum amount of water, and feel that pot. And it should basically never feel that heavy. And it should be basically uh, just slightly heavier than what it feels like when it comes out of the bag, because it usually comes out of the bag moist and not totally dry. So um, that's always a good way to do it. In fact, even at our facility, we pick up pots all the time.
Yeah, I think my forearm got a few more cuts from doing that over the winter over there. Um,
Yeah, that's right.
the next question that is probably going to come after medium for the novice grower is what kind of light cycle would be best? Now, we know that autoflowers from their origin are used to growing in areas that have uh, very wild light cycles, but I know that something we don't like to recommend is running your indoor lights 24 for autos. So can you kind of go into that?
Yeah. So that's a it can be a contentious question actually. I've perused some of the forums before and I see people fighting about the light cycle, and my honest opinion about it is it really doesn't matter. You can flower an auto plant with 6 hours of light or with 24. I don't recommend 24 because I believe that all plants sort of need some type of rest. Not to mention, it's probably a huge waste of electricity. I don't think you're going to be getting that photosynthesis is going to slow down. I think if you try to just charge through 24 hours of light all the time. However, some people do grow autos with 24 hours of light. It definitely can be done. They won't switch into veg or anything like that. Um, Now for breeding, of course, you never want to run less than about 14 hours because you won't be guaranteeing that the plants you're breeding with are actually autoflowers. So that's an important factor for breeding, of course. But the real answer for us in our facility is with the power company, we have peak power that we pay for during certain times of the day, and that happens to be from 9 o'clock. I'm sorry, from 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 9 o'clock at night. So at the very least, I always have them off during that time, and that usually add an hour to each into that. So 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So about 18 hours. But sometimes I've ran them at 16. I've ran them at 12. Um, I don't. I honestly, I think what it comes down to is there's probably a happy medium, but I haven't done enough real side by side experiments with it to see if what that happy medium is. But I think the general rule of thumb with most auto growers is between 16 and 20.
Is there any any pointers you want to give our audience for of things that we implement in our facility, or any other info such as like our soil recipe or any other tips for the audience?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. A lot of people ask, like, well, how do you, what kind of soil do you guys use, or what kind of fertilizers or whatnot? So, again, I always stand by like what works. If it works for you, you should stick with it. Uh, Experimentation can be costly, although it's always a great thing to do. It should be done in baby steps. I don't recommend people changing their whole scene, and sometimes it works out, but it can be a costly mistake especially if things are already going really well for you. Um, we use a product called Royal Gold Mendo Mix. It's a cocoa based, pretty hot amended soil. We get it. You can get about 30 days of good grow time with that. I'm sorry, without fertilizer, and after 30 days, you definitely need to amend it. So for us, if if we're depending on how big of pots we use, that sort of changes the recipe a little bit. But just a good organic top dress for consumable flour. And another product that I recommend for people if they want to keep things really simple is just a time release fertilizer. Those work really good with autos. It's very like plug and play simple. If you mix it to the bag specifications, you can basically just add water. It's as simple as that, and it'll get you through that entire cycle if you get the 2 or 3 month time release formula. So, and it's widely available. So it's great for people that are um, that don't have a lot of time to think about it and just want to do something that works good and simple. But certainly, again, the recipe is can vary dramatically from facility to facility and people's preferences.
Um, let's take the time to switch gears and talk about outdoor. With spring looming, um, do you kind of want to give our audience a basic idea on the best dates to start plants?
Yes. So one of the things I see the most with especially beginners or people that don't have much experience growing autos is their desire to try to get them in the ground as soon as possible. Um, that's a pretty big mistake if you're rushing it, because again, I sort of brought up that thing in that point in the beginning about you want completely unhindered growth for these plants from the very beginning. And so if you start them too early in the year and you've got two super cold nights or a week of rain, it's going to greatly diminish the quality and the yield of your crop, because you're basically eating away that 20 that well even as low as 15 to 30 days of veg that you have, that's again pre-programmed into the plant. So um, the key is getting the maximum out of that 15 to 30 days to get the biggest plants possible before they start to switch into flower. So certainly, obviously, it depends greatly on your climate and your region, but the best recommendation I can give is to make sure that you're at a point where your nights aren't going to drop much below the 40s, and you're going to have sunny days. And always check the 10-day forecast. It's not a bad idea to, at least around here, our 10-day forecasts are fairly accurate. So that's a good enough chunk of time to really kind of get an idea if you're going to let those plants get out the gate and start sprinting. So um, in California, there's people already starting their seeds in the desert. I talked to a lot of professional cultivators, and I mean, we're talking huge scale type farms that grow just massive amounts of plants, and um, they will start their plants as early as last week. So that would be basically the 1st of March, and that's down in the desert. So they're essentially waiting for the nights to warm up enough to keep the plants from getting shocked in the evening and nighttime. And then in Central California, I think a lot of people are kind of shooting for around the 15th of March, and then up here up north, and we're looking more at like the end of March or the 1st of April. So again, those are geographical. I mean, I'm just referring to our state, but I think the general point is make sure you've got warm enough nights and decent enough weather, and they should do really good.
Okay, so piggybacking on that question, um, do you have any tips for starting seedlings, and would you uh, recommend maybe starting them indoors and then moving them out, or otherwise?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the seedlings were we I think we actually would like to do a whole episode on seedlings and our process for germination. I think it's really important. Of course, being a seed company, we get an awful lot of people asking us like, how do you germinate seeds and what's the best way to do it? So I'm going to skip a lot of the nitty gritty on that, but I will say that one thing I think, if I have any points to bring up with regards to autoflowers specifically, is that because these plants are again on that predisposed timeline, it's really important that they all sort of get that equal opportunity to run out of that proverbial gate that opens upon sprouting or more upon emerging from the soil. So to put it simple, we sprout them to roughly between a half inch and maybe up to 2.5 inches at the most. Sprouts like in a paper towel, and then when we plant them, we try to leave the very top of the seed shell, if it's still got a shell on it, or the top of the plant just barely exposed out of the dirt. And if you plant them like that, pretty much the next day or 2 days later, you're going to have a perfectly even bed of plants that all got even treatment. And I don't really like putting them underneath the soil, because they can get stuck under something, or a little clod of dirt or a little pebble or a piece of cocoa, and and all of a sudden it could be 3 days before that one emerges, whereas the one next to it might have come out the day you planted it, and then that 3 days will that plant will be harvested 3 days later, if not more. So I think that's the best point I can bring up about autos is try to just give them equal treatment. It's worth the extra time to plant them by hand. Now, of course, there's really big farmers out there that this doesn't apply to them. I mean, there's farmers that have dozens or more employees and huge farms, and they plant with tractors. And if the guys that plant with tractors usually have some sort of sprouted seed in a like a plug or a little special kind of dirt, like planting device. It's kind of hard to explain, but it basically flings the seedling into the ground and plants acres in a matter of hours. So that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, give them even treatment, equal treatment. Try to get them in the ground at the same time, and you're going to do a lot better. I definitely never recommend just planting seeds directly in the dirt. You, hands down, you're going to have a lower success rate. Now, certainly a lot of people do, and if you don't mind saving, you're going to save some labor. And if it's worth it for you to save that labor and just drop seeds in the ground, then you're still going to get plants, but you will have less success than sprouting them and planting them by hand.
So for the growers dedicating an area outside for autos, how should they space them in their given canopy space?
So yeah, that's a question we get a lot of times, and you can actually look at our website, and we try to give the best possible guidance to people on that question. It's a commonly asked question, and so it's sort of part of our strain description, and it really varies by strain, but it's kind of ranges between 18 inches and 36 inches would be about the most, and that's like pretend you have like a 36-inch grid. That would be the most I would recommend. Certainly you can go if you have all the space and you're not trying to maximize your canopy or your square footage, the area that you have, that they don't have to be that close. I mean, if they're in pots and they're just in your garden or something and you're just growing a few plants, it doesn't really matter. But if you're in California, we're restricted by canopy size for our licenses. So here, I guess it's sort of, I have this bias because what I see professional farmers doing is essentially trying to absolutely get the maximum amount of yield from a certain amount of square footage. And in that case, they really kind of put them in pretty thick. And what I typically see is for an acre, anywhere between a minimum of 10,000 seeds or plants all the way up to about 16,000. So um, with that math, you can see that brings the spacing pretty tight into that kind of 18-inch range. So max, if you're trying to maximize your canopy 100%, then you want to packed in. Is it's better to have more and call them out than it is to not have enough. Otherwise, they're going to be happier with more space. So certainly, I guess the question is depending on what you're looking for.
Right on. So one last question that I have on the outdoor portion of this is a lot of people ask, can they or is it a viable option to grow autos alongside full-term outdoor plants?
Yes, it's a common question, and the answer is absolutely. Of course, you have to be careful, knowing that the full-term plant will continue to veg, to stay in vegetative growth, and therefore could shade out the auto plant. But that's actually a really common way that cultivators around here grow autoflowers, is they basically satellite their plants. They'll put one full term plant in a pot, in a really large grow pot, say anywhere from 100 to 600-gallon grow pot, and then they'll make a circle of autoflowers around them, or at least a crescent shape, like a half circle on the south side of the plant. And they basically grow together up until the autoflowers finish flowering. And at that point, that's usually right around the time when the full term sort of starts to shade it out. So it's a really good strategy. If you can basically, it's a way to kind of maximize that canopy early on in the year and get yourself a early harvest with, and still be able to grow really big full term plants. The alternative method, which I think we'd like to do a whole episode on, sort of outdoor growing specifically, and how to really maximize their yields, and what a lot of California growers are doing by filling canopies twice essentially, which is a different method altogether. Um, but I think that the main point of what I'm trying to get at is that it's an excellent way to do it. If you're starting your plants in April or May, and 3 months later you're going to have finished flower while the other ones are still doing their thing. And then once you harvest the autos, then the full term photos are going to basically fill the canopy up.
Right on. So I think that can cover the first portion of this segment we are calling Autoflowers 101. Um, on the next segment of this, we will be covering frequently asked questions. So stay tuned for that next week. Um, Everybody who has not signed up for the Great American Auto Race can do so by visiting our website. Or if you're on Instagram, just click the link in our bio and look for the Great American Auto Race tab. Um, we are back on it, so expect episodes over the next couple of weeks as we roll into spring and prepare for 420. Hopefully, the country is in a much better mental space by the time those dates roll around. So everybody, we look forward to seeing your gardens. If you are growing any 2020 gear, please feel free to send us photos via our website or through DMs. Adam, do you have any final words for this episode?
Yeah, I definitely, a couple things. I don't want people to be discouraged at the sort of lack of information, in that I know there's so much to talk about here. We try to keep these podcasts short, and that's why we call it 20 minutes with 2020. Of course, a lot of them end up being 30 minutes, but I think we have a lot more stuff to talk about. So kind of, I encourage you to stay tuned, and the next episodes on frequently asked questions will probably fill in some of the voids that were left during this one. And again, yeah, certainly reach out to us, and we love it when people send us questions that we can add to the podcast. So we'll keep this going. I'm sure there'll be multiple episodes on autoflowers, and we'll probably sort of uh, focus in on certain aspects more. And I definitely want to do more on outdoor growing, field growing. Although I don't have much experience with field growing itself, I certainly get a lot of feedback and information from professional farmers who grow huge, massive fields of autos, and wouldn't do it any other way. I mean, they basically they don't quite double their yields, but they double their crops every year, and maximize that use of space throughout the entire year. So there's a lot I'd love to talk about, but we'll keep this. We'll end this one here, and we'll go into the frequently asked questions on the next one, and then we'll start um, focusing in on some of these other aspects.
Right on, guys. So with that being said, do not feel free to send us questions, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for listening. Comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube so that you are up to date on all of our videos. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next week.